Totally agree. Yeah, it's kind of hard to be short down here. Yeah. I feel like Palantir might be a bit short because it's snowing, but still our market's growing. But that is a good define for us here.
over half. Tesla up throw open.
Quantum's got a little spike going right now while market's just tanking. This was like really weak strikes.
I'm gonna be looking for that second chance into 246, 246.50.
I know. Should be able to catch the short.
Another 25%.
Looking for that second chance
Watching
into pre-market.
Tesla for a 9 EMA retest off the
Yeah,
pre-market break.
nice retest.
So watching cues for a 9 EMA bounce.
Fix it's up 24.60.
Short some Palantir here. Close risk.
Alright, I'm gonna take Q's on prior breaks for the 9.
You're holding my short arm on. You helped it open a small piece. Added with Tesla short.
No fill yet on QQQ.
Alone.
He's still
Nvidia,
holding
similar
the
trade.
9.
As Tesla, that second chance into pre-market.
Reddit, lower day with volume. Got filled with Q's.
Short of that Tesla, Nvidia break.
Yeah. Okay. Just drop below 35.
I'm gonna stop out above 938 candle highs. If we break above those swings, 47.50s, I'm out of that short in Tesla. PLTR also breaking low at pre-market and lows. Gonna be looking for that second chance.
Not all my plates.
seems like Tesla is relatively stronger.
Q's looking like a hitchhiker to the downside. Every break 458.
Get a open below of day on the Qs. So I'm switching over to 2-minute 5-hour breaks for the first exit.
Short is on Amazon as well. I'm covering a little bit in Tesla here into the slow days, 430s, 240, sorry, 240s, 244.
These are doing a second chance off of the opening range break.
No go 21.
MLGO pre-market highs. Up out of half of my Q's short. Has to break even. I feel like if this is going to do a second chance, it needs to go lower right now. Otherwise, fashion relief or offsides is more in play. Oops. Second exit is 5-minute per hour breaks. Or break even. I guess I'll hit both of them. Took the second half 5-minute per hour breaks. Alright, I'm out. That's about VWAP.
248 in VWAP. I'm out. 248.50. I'm stopped out in Tesla. Alright, that's good.
I went long Google.
Yeah, it's short again in Tesla here. 247s. Yeah, I'm out of that short. Didn't like that. I'm still holding Nvidia short from 105. Looking for it to reject VWAP pre-market low. If we break above 105.20s, I'm all out. Especially if the Q's reclaim that 460.
Alright. It's interesting to see kind of a rubber band earlier in the day. My Ford is up quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm stopped out of Nvidia short, Tesla, and Amazon. Q's breaking over that 461.
Ricky, did you ask Carlton yet?
Yeah,
Any good? Good? Are you good?
I haven't gotten an answer yet.
Oh, okay. No, the fuck you trade this trade. Do you guys see anything else to know?
Nah, bro. Only thing I'm like trying now, again, this is my last one, is that Tesla 251 projection.
What you gonna put on?
Just like 10%, 15, 20%. Just small. Had two paper
That's
cuts
small to
already.
you?
Yeah, I had two paper
Yeah,
cuts already.
crazy. Wait, you think 10 to 20 is small?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, you're bugging, bro.
want to tell Jeff that he'll kill you. See my clone.
Alright, that was a good stop in Tesla. 248. That second chance didn't work.
Hey,
My chemistry are looking the opening range. Honestly, are MSFP.
Was looking at the video for professional late.
Yeah, same here. Video. Tesla setting up for that one too.
The same is on the queues, but let's see if we can hold below BWAP. Oh, what are you targeting? Low day or
For
just trailing?
Nvidia.
I hope we can have some momentum because Nvidia used to bounce but let's see.
Mm.
Going some there. Here. Almost log day.
Amazon below 185.
We're buying on the log day. Nvidia. I'm not taking that, but maybe we are going to do more ranges there. Let's see.
Oh shit. Not sure how
It's like a solid bounce now.
I
Mm-hmm.
If there is relatively stronger there. Do you guys know when are going to be released the tariffs details?
I think tomorrow. Well, Wednesday. Sorry,
I think
Wednesday.
just on Wednesday.
Palantir, how the hell is that? Let's
Uh, because I heard that it was like in the one they are going to give some details. It's tomorrow, right?
uses to help down executions.
I mean, they haven't disclosed all the information. I think Wednesday is when they'll tell everything.
That sucks. I was up like $200, and then I was just covering some positions, looked over at my P&L, and I was down like 250. No idea how it happened because I was short like 500 shares. just made it all back, thank God. That Palantir spike. Straight up mean reversion. Man, I was like, I got some great trades today, and then like I was up $500 at peak, and then I just looked down and I was down half stop. That was ridiculous. Yeah, for sure. And that's what I've been doing like pretty well. Like I'll look over and my realized P&L is so much, and then I'm only in like 50 or 100 shares left, so I'm very confused.
originated
Recording in
because of
progress.
someone in the community or on our desk. There is someone that is always the reason why we are making that video. And ironically, one of the most fun things for me was to make that video and know exactly, and I usually never tell the people that have inspired the reason for that video or the person that has inspired the reason for that video, but when I'm writing the outline for the video or writing the outline for for like the time that we spend together here, I am almost always thinking about one specific person as if I'm delivering the message to them. I approach things differently. I'm not trying to care about views or clicks or anything like that. I 100% have one person that I'm doing this video for, and this person is in the room today. That's a part of the community and a part of our desk in the community as an extension of it. But what was fascinating for me was to see how on Friday, before this video was released, before the video even came out, it was really funny because this one of the person who really was the big inspiration for the video was somebody who on average was averaging about $100 a day, maybe $80 a day, but they were kind of striving for more. And ironically, on Friday, by not focusing on that, they put up their first almost $1,000 a day. And it was so funny to see the focus in their mind shift from I want to make $1,000 to I just want to make $200. And you know, we had talked about that in advance of the video going live. They didn't see the video or anything like that, but it was so funny to see how they just focused on trading well. And it's like at noon, I heard from them and they were like, or at 11 o'clock, they were like, yeah, I'm having a pretty good day. And I was like, great, that's awesome. Congratulations. Like all that stuff. Like it's been a decent opportunity in the day. And then funny enough, they kind of kept staying with it and they more than doubled their P&L by the end of the day just by staying with it, just by doing the things that we talk about in that video. You know, you think about how much you're risking, not how much you're trying to make. And by risking $100, they were able to make an extra $500 or 700, like whatever it was, you know, basically doubling their P&L almost in that very, very simple thing. The market didn't shift for them. I mean, the market opportunity was good, let's be honest. Friday was a very opportunistic day. But what really shifted was their mindset. And that's the most powerful thing to get is your mind will need to shift in order for you to be able to take advantage of the opportunities in trading. You know, all the people that have done Scalp Radar, I think we try and instill that from the beginning in Scalp Radar is in that your mindset actually shifts. Instead of actively pursuing trades and looking for confirmation that that trade is there, you're actually spending more time looking at an opportunity and going, yeah, that's not for me. Yeah, that's not for me. Yeah, that's not for me. Because that just makes the really good ones so obvious. And it doesn't take that long to start to experience that shift. But once you do start to experience it, that's a monumental shift extrapolated out over time. Because what really happens is instead of going in and going, I really hope this works, you start to develop this mindset that helps you recognize as the Scalp Radar is kicking out alerts, you're like, that's not for me. That's not for me. That's not for me. That's not for me. And then you're finding the one that hits and is for you. And it's just like, how does not everybody see this? This is so clearly a great trade. And then it's just so much easier for you to do your job and just put on the right risk. And it's those moments of tension that really kind of help you grow, but it has to be the right kind of tension. And when it's tension, like you're hoping that it turns into a good trade, or it kind of maybe sort of looks like it could be a good trade, but there are all these other factors, and you're feeling the tension because it's not really that great of a trade, but you're experiencing that tension. That's not the tension that's going to help you grow. The tension that's going to help you grow is recognizing that it's not really that great, stepping aside from it, which the setups fortnight that we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is going to be really helpful in doing that. And then stepping into those moments that are, okay, I'm a little uncomfortable with the process of putting on this trade because, there's still some variables, even though it lines up and everything's right. That's the good tension because that's the tension you can learn from. When you really have a great opportunity that just falls into your lap, that's where you want that tension to be there. That's where you want that friction to be there to help you grow. But you don't want the friction that's bad friction in trading. You don't want the friction that's like, is it really like maybe like, I don't know, that's bad friction. You want the friction of, I'm working on this in this trade. I see this fashionably late. I'm waiting for it to dip out a little bit so I can see the buying on the tape and then ride it up. I'm working on this 9 EMA continuation, right? Which is like this 9 EMA continuation is an amazing trade that that's the first one that I am adding. It won't be on the radar, but actually putting it into the scalp radar as an addendum to, I have 2 goals this year for the scalp radar. One is add the setups. We're working on the setups. We're spending 2 weeks right now working on the setups. I already have them outlined. We're going through it again. The second thing that we're going to add is some of the other trades, and they might not make it to the actual radar. The technology might not be there, but the way we teach trades in the scalp radar is the way I want to teach trades constantly, which is multi-level, very detailed, breaking down the variables so that you can eventually evolve out of the scalp, needing to use the scalp radar, and you can just sit there and wait for these opportunities to fall into your lap. That's the goal of it, and that's why we fought so hard to. Everybody wanted to do a 1 year thing, and I get it. Like I get it. Like 1 year is like there's like all this conversation about like lifetime is crappy because of this and that and this, and like what if people won't say subscribe and stuff like that. And I said, I don't want that at all. I want it to be a one time, you have access to it as long as it's there. And that gives me the room to be able to add things in and not feel bad that some people's time is up and other people are like, basically, if you have access to it, you're going to have access to that material. So all of the things that are added on that we're going to work on this week, the things that we're going to add, like those are going to be the best things that we can do. And you're going to have access to it, which is really exciting. So that's why I'm so passionate about that element of it outside of anything else. And I apologize for being excited about it, but it's not the product itself. It's the way it is helping people grow and the way that all these things are coming together to help people get better faster. And that's what we're all here to do today. So I appreciate everybody sticking with me. I really appreciate the kind words that some people are saying. This is really fascinating for me to see how traders develop. And don't ever forget what my mission is when I come into any one of these meetings. It's my job is to help traders develop faster, period. That's it. We don't have the luxury on our desk when we're trying to build 7 and 8 figure traders, when we're trying to help people get up the development curve, to say, I really hope that you have a good luck doing this. And if you do this over time, you'll be fine. That is true. But we also need to get some immediate results. And we need to be impactful with those results right away. And if we're not, we're all kind of just wasting each other's time at that point. And that's not what I'm here to do. The markets are evolving really, really quickly. Now we're going to start talking about some markets. The markets are evolving super, super quick, which is really fun. And just confirm that you can see my screen here. But with that quick evolution, we really want to be so aware of our need to evolve with it. We don't ever want to put ourselves in a trap situation, which is, I think it's this, but it's really that, or I'm really stuck on this, I don't know what to do. those are just kind of traps that we'll let other people in their development process struggle with, and we'll stay focused on the outcomes. I'm sorry, focused on the process that will yield really strong outcomes. Let's get into the market today because we had a fascinating setup. Ricardo asked, can we get immediate results with this kind of market? The entire goal is for people to be able to get immediate results in their trading, immediate improvements in their trading. The markets will always shift. Some markets will be easier, some markets will be tighter, some markets will be tougher, some markets will be looser. But my goal is to help people get up the development curve so that whatever market environment you're in, you are taking advantage of the challenges in front of you. Those are the skills that you need to be building constantly. Okay, bigger picture. So, Ricardo, I understand the concern. I do. But forget about the market and think about the skills. Think about the skills that you are developing. That is the bigger focus. I apologize for a million lines on the chart right now. When markets get confusing, you will see more lines on my charts. And that is really what we're focused on today. Bigger picture. We had this downtrend, which is one setup. Trending down is one setup, right? No one has more lines than Steve. That's very true. And especially when Steve's been trading for a stock for a while, he has way more lines than I do. But when things get confusing, I tend to have a lot of lines on my chart. And I would argue that right now it's a little bit confusing. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. Because confusion leads to opportunity. Markets like clarity, but confusion does lead to opportunity for us, which is exciting. So downtrending, we're going to get into the, as we go through it, I'm going to today share the setups that I'm seeing and verbalize the things that I'm seeing. I'm going to challenge some of the people here in the room to answer some of the questions that I'll have for you about the trades and about the setups. We'll argue, debate, struggle, get pissed at each other about what setup is what. And that's all a part of this process together. Somebody's going to tell me, Jeff, you're absolutely wrong, and I'll be thrilled to hear it if they're right. If you tell me I'm wrong and I'm actually right, big pet peeve of mine. But like, and you have to explain why. Same thing for me. If I tell you I'm right and I don't have a reason why I'm right or why I think I'm right, that's a big problem across the board. So I expect people to challenge me on what the setups are and what we're looking at this week. But right now, here's a very clear example. Okay. We're going to name all the setups that we work on each week, and we're going to give examples of it. What is this setup? Bottom left of your chart. What's this little setup to the upside? If you're looking at it, you can see the Bollinger Bands, which obviously I only put on the lower three charts, and I don't really look at them. I just kind of have them on it. Well, what is this setup? Before it fails, what is it?
Breakout.
No, before it fails.
All-time high breakout.
It's a breakout, right? It breaks the high of that consolidation. Setup one is breakout. Setup two, what happens after the breakout? Do we trend? No, we have a failed breakout, right? Very simple rule. Breakouts should lead to trends. Did that breakout lead to a trend? No, it did not. So what happened to that breakout? It turned into a failed breakout. Yes.
Failed breakout.
Yes, thank you. Please jump in and interrupt me. Please, everybody, just jump in, post in the chat, all that stuff. When we went to the failed breakout, what is your target of a failed breakout?
Low of the range.
The other end of the range, right? After we got to the other end of the range, what happened? Let's call this right here the other end of the range. Let me just put it on the daily so we can see. We'll all look at the same thing. Okay, here we go. I gotta clean up my lines, but yeah. So we had this little breakout that turned into a failed breakout. We did go quickly to the other end of the range, but then what happened?
Break out to the downside.
We consolidated and broke to the downside. We did break to the downside, right? And you could argue we broke here or here, but I really think like the entirety of the range was right here where that red line was. So then we started to consolidate below the range, right? And I understand there's more complexity to this, but we started to consolidate. There's a pending resolution below the range. So then we started to break out to the downside. What should happen from breakouts? What should breakouts turn into?
Trend.
Starts with a T. Yep, trend. So those are the three setups that we're talking about right now. Breakout, trend, failed breakout. When you have consolidations or ranges being built, those are really the three setups that you're looking for, right? You're looking for a breakout to turn into a trend, and if it doesn't turn into a trend, it likely turns into a failed breakout. Conceptually, does anybody have any questions about those? Anybody at all have any question? The consolidation is a check in your favor to the downside. Yeah, because it's confirming that breakout, right?
I have a question. Do you consider a percentage of the expansion of the break to consider a failed breakout? I remember we have like 30% of the range that we can be considering a failed breakout. So it cannot be like a failed breakout. Instead, can be like a reversal there. So
So your question is, if I'm hearing it correctly, if it breaks, say this broke to the upside and it went more than 30% of the range up,
yeah, yeah.
right? It went more than 30% of the range up. Would that invalidate the idea of a failed breakout?
Yeah, or do you change the setup there? For example, if break out 50% of the range and then move down.
Pardon?
It's like, for example, if we have the range and we
Yeah.
break 50% above the range, do you still consider that as a failed breakout or is a different setup?
So that's one of the nuances that you'll want to get into over the course of the week to define specifics for you. This is true on every time frame that you will ever trade. All of this is true on every time frame that you will ever trade. It's true on weeklies, it's true on dailies. The same concept holds true on hourlies, 15 minutes, and intradays. Like you will see the same chart patterns on a 1 minute chart that you'll see on a daily. It's the psychology of the participants involved. So, Jamie, what do you think?
I have as a setup the 30%. If the move is below the 30%, I will consider that as a failed breakout. For example, and in
But let me interject, and this is the sort of debate I'm happy to have, right? When the breakout goes more than 30% of the range, at that point, why would we be looking for a failed breakout? Wouldn't you be looking for it to establish trend in that direction?
yeah, that will be more like a trend.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
instinctually, when you have a breakout, you should, and this is a giant trap people get into. You'll have a breakout and you'll be like, yeah, maybe it's a failed breakout. And then it just holds up, right? And then it starts to go higher. You want to let the setups be obvious to you. You don't want to predict these. You want to think, if it does this, is it that? But you don't want to predict what setup it is. If it does change, you want to be able to respond. And we had an opportunity today that we'll cover intraday that does really show kind of a lot of what we're talking about. if the breakout just starts to go, you do not want to think, well, what if it's a failed breakout? Because what are you missing? You're going to miss the trending portion of that breakout. You're going to miss the continuation elements of that breakout, aren't you? You're going to miss the day two. You're going to miss the really good trend that can be established for days, weeks, months after, right?
Yeah.
So today, all we're going to do is lay out all of the different setups that we're going to be covering over the course of the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to spend time variabilizing each of those setups over the next 2 weeks with the examples we see and other examples that we can pull up. Okay? So the first three are breakout, trend, and failed breakout. Those are the things that we see, right? Breakout, trend, failed breakout. We see here, breakout. Let me get my mouse. Where's my mouse? There we go. Breakout didn't trend to the upside, turned into a failed breakout when it got back below the range, got to the low end of the range, consolidated, which consolidation is not really a setup. We call that balance. I call that balancing. All right. Balancing is the same as ranging, consolidating. Right? Like those are interchangeable concepts in my mind. Again, happy to be wrong with any of this stuff, but for now, those are balancing. Those are all terms for balancing, right? The balance occurred below the low of the range, then we turned into a trending environment to the downside, right? And then we had oversold conditions. Does anybody remember like this day was so aggressive and we were just so oversold? And I call that excessive excess. And why I call it that, and people call it overextended or whatever, I call it excessive excess. Why do you think I call it excessive excess versus overextended? Who wants to think why I call it that versus overextended?
Because it's going too far too fast, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't continue.
Correct. Overextended is like, yeah, that's too far too fast. Excessive excess in my mind is like, that's too far too fast and then too far too fast. And the core idea here is you can draw a trend line right there. And then you can draw a steeper trend line. Now I'm going to put more lines on my charts right there. Do you see that concept? This was all excessive, right? This is excessive excess when you have an accelerated trend line. That's how I differentiate the two between trending and excessive excess. Trending can remain on that trend line as long as it wants to. But when it starts to move away from that trend line, that's an entirely different setup, right? Is excessive excess a setup or is it closer to the ranging concept, not a setup? I view it as a setup, and it's my term for overextension. Does that make sense? It's what I want to clarify. If I look at it, something as overextended, and you can measure it in a million different ways. Over 70 RSI, below 30 RSI. Yeah, that's extended, right? That's overextended. Excessive excess really is extreme, isn't it? Okay, so these are the 5. And I'm going to create a document, or some, maybe, you know what? I don't want to create it. Can somebody create a document where we're listing these out, please? Okay. Okay. We're going to don't worry about all the terminology. Let's just define them today. Save all the questions about specific setups for later this week and next week, okay? Because I want to get them out there so that people can be aware of them. And then all the questions you have for them, start to note them. So when we talk about that setup, you can talk about this specific one. Just let's get through it today. We're already 28 minutes in. I know I took time for a little spiel at the beginning, but let's get all of them listed out today. And then all these little questions you have that are important questions, we will work through them together over the course of the next 2 weeks. Okay? Find examples, all that stuff. Okay. Another setup which actually happened. Then we're going through this. So we had excessive excess, we had a bounce, right? We had a little consolidation, we had an attempt to break that consolidation or range. We had this little point of balance, right? That's what we talked about. Balancing, we tried to break to the upside, break it to the downside, broke it to the upside, and then came right back. So that's a failed breakout. We then gapped down today where? Where did we gap down to today?
Below the range.
Which is what?
A breakdown.
Support.
We had
Yes.
the divergence, we had support in the SPYs, and we got kind of below the March low on the Qs.
Correct, yes, but we're looking at the SPYs today, so you basically gap down into a potential area of support, right? So gapping into key support is another setup, right? A gap into key support is a setup. You can have a gap into key resistance or key support. So we can call it gap into key level, right? That's another setup. So I'm trying to think of the other ones. I have them all listed. 7, I think there are 8 of them. Where is support? Support was right down here. Right? Support was right down there. And ironically, it's also trendline support on a much higher time frame. Which is kind of crazy to think about. But support, I viewed support as right into 550. It's where we bounced from before. Okay? So it could have been a breakout, but in fact, what happened instead?
Bouncing, kind of bouncing.
And we had a
Yes.
failed, we attempted to break and we failed.
And we failed. That's exactly right, right? So, from failed move, you expect some sort of pretty good response. And we'll get into that in just a second. But let me lay out the other ones. Day 2, day 2, day 3, etc. Day 2, 3, etc. And we'll get into the nuances this week. Don't worry about it too much. But day 2, day 3, I view as its own setup. A day 1 catalyst, a good day 1 catalyst, is its own setup because that's a fresh breaking news. That's its own setup. And then day 2 and day 3 are its own setup as well. Why would those be their own setup? Why would breaking news be its own setup? Cameron had
Different set of rules.
yeah, Roberto. Why would breaking news be its own setup?
Different set of rules. You are less aware of the technicals, more aware of the situation, the potential volatility, the volume created by the headline. It's different stuff.
Essentially, it's new information that everyone has to respond to, right?
Yes, sir.
It's new information that everybody has to respond to. And it can trump anything that's on the technicals, can it?
Absolutely.
Everything on the technicals can get completely disregarded in breaking news. Subsequently, day 2 and day 3 can also be a part of that, right? So right now I have 8 setups. I have breakout, trend, failed breakout, balancing, excessive excess, or overextension, whatever you want to call it, gap into key level, fresh breaking news, and day 2, day 3. Am I missing anything that people think are very important? I just wanted to lay out all 8 of those. We did not distinguish direction. We did not distinguish anything else. Jeremy nailed it. Yes. Range breakout is a breakout. The only other one, and why I saved this for the very last, was because of what we're potentially seeing in the market. So let's get into the intraday. Let's look at the market. Let's look at SPY, right? We had that first move down that was pretty nasty looking. But then since basically 9:45, we found what? What sort of pressure?
Buying pressures.
Really steady buying pressure, right? Has it been aggressive or passive?
Aggressive.
Passive.
It's been both, actually. It was aggressive initially, and then look how much of that gets retraced, and then look how choppy it's been, right? So it was aggressive and then passive and then kind of a little bit pseudo-aggressive, right? Like in certain stocks, though, it's been much more aggressive than others. What potentially could that mean for all of this entire range that we're in? What setup could we be looking at? Because we failed at the downside.
Volatility range.
Volatility in range, yes. So if we start to continue to grind higher, you could see us put in a range for the next couple days that is pretty volatile, right? We'll test both ends of the range pretty quickly. I don't know that that's going to be the case because we're seeing that divergence between passive and aggressive participation. Looking around, we're seeing certain names act very aggressively and others act passively. But in theory, we could be looking at volatility in range, which is the 9th setup. Okay? So there are 9 setups. I wish I could round it out into 10, but I don't have 10, and I don't want to create more stuff. But there are 9 setups that I think are very critical to learn. Breakouts, trends, failed breakout, balancing, excessive excess, gap into key levels, day 2, day 3, breaking news, and volatility in range. All right? Those are the 9 that we're talking about. Again, with everything we talk about, if you wanted to get really good at something, take one. Day 1 would be fresh breaking news. Okay. All right, let's get into some of the things that we've seen. So the setup potentially, and this is why I love studying setups. Coming into today, the setup could have been gap out of range. The setup could have been failed breakdown. The setup was what? Where did we open? Where did we open?
And right
We
to
opened
support.
right at key support, right? So in fact, did the setup change as soon as we traded below key support?
Not really.
Well, why didn't it?
Well, I think you will want to hold below the key support, maybe go sideways, maybe then break to the downside further with increasing volume.
Well, so here's the thing. If I tell you we went into a support level and then we traded past it, what are you thinking about with that? How should your mind be classifying that?
Well, I think personally, I am looking at perhaps the possible outcomes that we should have. So I think initially I'll be looking for a breakdown or a breakout of range.
Yep.
When
Which we got, right? I mean, technically we got the breakout of range, right? We traded below. Is that right?
And this kind of price action, when you trade below, and then retrace, it's actually pretty common.
It is. It's very common because it's just confirming. So the setup initially on the open was gap into key support, and then it was breakout of range, right? And you're looking for clues that each of those is valid, aren't you?
Yeah, correct.
What you're describing are the clues that that setup is valid. the consolidation below, the increasing volume, all that stuff are clues that that breakout is a valid setup, aren't they? Isn't it?
Yeah, that's what you would want to see for that setup to be valid.
Yep. And then all of a sudden that setup did what?
Then it's invalidated. What should
changed.
happen doesn't happen.
Yes, exactly. And then the setup changed again. So we're currently on the third setup of the day, aren't we?
Yeah, that's
Third
crazy.
potential setup of the day. And it's 11 o'clock. We've been trading for 90 minutes. For 15 minutes, well, for right until the open, we had one setup. After the open, we had a different setup. And then we had another setup, right? If you are adjusting to this, are you able to trade momentum to the short side because it's a range break? We didn't really have a trigger on the gap into key support because it never really went higher, right? It never like showed us the gap into key support was valid. We never saw the buying pressure that you would need to see for that, right? But then for the momentum to the downside, was that valid for a little bit at least?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it was completely valid for a little bit. But then it got invalidated pretty quickly by some of the individual price action, right? Yeah, there were some good 9 EMA continuation trades. But then it got invalidated pretty quickly, right? By like 9:45, it was sort of invalidated. And then you can flip your bias and trade it the other direction, right? Because the setup changed. And it's not about you flipping your bias, it's about you just trading what's being presented by the market. It's not putting a time constraint on anything. It's just saying the setup changed. Okay, now I have a trade. Imagine the power in your psychology if you're sitting there and going, I'm only going to trade when the setup changes. And then the setup changes and you go, well, I'm connecting my identity to I'm a good trader when the setup changes. The setup just changed. Are you going to allow yourself the excuse of sitting out?
No.
No, you're not. If you recognize your biggest edge occurs when the setup changes, the setup just changed, right? So then you can go into your playbook and figure that out, right? You can take some trades. You can go to some of the things that were relatively stronger. Honestly, Tesla's been relatively strong. PLTR, really aggressively, relatively strong. You know, some of the other names like relatively strong. Coin, relatively strong. I was looking at MSTR. But yeah, like those bounced like pretty good, like right away. Walmart. Yeah, like some of the more consumer staples. Apple's been relatively strong. Apple was like crazy strong right from the open. When everything else was down, Apple was what? Not going down at all, right? DLTR had one of the best ones of like the failure and then it's been up, right? Tesla, obviously. You know, so this is where you can really take advantage of the setup changing and go to your short list of names. You know, I thought Amazon maybe was a good short for the 9 EMA continuation trade, I think like here. And it just didn't really follow through at all, right? Do I think Amazon's a good long now? Is Amazon the name that I would go to when I recognize the market bouncing?
No.
Not this one.
It's relatively weak, right? It's relatively weak. NVIDIA, I was like, oh, maybe this is a gap down. Jeez, look how many lines I have on NVIDIA's chart. I gotta clean this up. NVIDIA, I was like, oh, maybe this is a gap down into the key support area, right? Has this responded like it's relatively strong? No, not at all. So you can play the relative strength, relative weakness game here very, very easily. And you can allow, okay, the setup has changed. I can put myself in a good position. If anybody wants a good example of an excessive excess style trade, this MLGO, right? It's been up and then it had this blow off on the open. And now it's like kind of back and reset. And now it feels like it's going to curl and be a really good long later in the day. We'll see. But that is an example of excessive excess. Okay. I have 2 more minutes. I have 2 more minutes. Who, I don't want to answer questions about specific setups, but I do really want to get into some of the things that I think about when it comes to the rest of the week. So let's look at Qs, for example, because Qs are below the low of the range. So Qs have broken out. With SPY being a failed breakdown and Qs being a breakdown, and we covered this last week, I think. If we get a rally up to this 466 right here in Qs, right, a little bit higher, what am I thinking about? Am I thinking that, okay, that level doesn't matter, or what am I thinking for bigger picture for the trades?
Do you have a potential of that becoming resistance?
You have a potential of it becoming resistance. So I'm really going to dial into what's happening with SPY, right? Because SPY is showing leadership here, aren't they? Isn't it? Sorry. Isn't it? IWM, is it showing relative strength or relative weakness to Qs? You notice how it's right into that key area, right? Already. Let's look at Bitcoin. I mean, it took back the gap. That's crazy, right? Like, so these are the things that I'm thinking about, and we'll be thinking about so much more this week. Why will we be thinking about these things so much more this week in context of every trade we take? Relative strength, relative weakness. The tariff. Yes, the tariffs are going to be some of the biggest news, and that is Wednesday, I believe, right? There's a ton going on outside of tariffs, but what piece of news trumps everything? Sorry for the term Trump. I get in trouble for that. I don't mean Trump in that way.
Nice
But
pun.
yeah, it's a good pun. But that news is huge from a global macro perspective. So what I expect the setups to be very stable at the beginning of the week, knowing that we have that on Wednesday. I expect there to be a lot of confusion and a lot of moving around and a lot of just, I don't know what to do from market participants' perspectives, right? So I'll be looking for a lot of offside style trades. I'll be looking for a lot of trades into edges of ranges. I don't expect massive volatility, but I am thinking about things from the perspective of everybody was so bearish this morning. I mean, every call was like, we are going to get crushed. This is awful news. But don't ever forget the news is not out yet. When the news comes out, we will have a fresh news catalyst. On Wednesday, we will likely be talking about fresh news catalyst trades. That will supersede any of the setups that we have there. We'll take them into consideration. But I'll leave you with two things. As participants, out of the 9 setups that we have, our biggest sources of edge are what? As intraday traders, what are our biggest sources of edge?
The flexibility and the speed.
Change. When I hear you say flexibility, I hear you say change. When setups change, right? When setups change, that is a giant source of edge for us. We have to be flexible with it. But when a setup changes, that's a giant source of edge for us. What's the second big source of edge for us?
Selectivity.
Selectivity, but why would selectivity matter? What I mean the big sources of edge just within these setups. Big sources of edge just within these setups.
So I think just aligning your time frames or your levels.
And everything aligns. when a breakout, when you have a breakout set up and everything lines up, right? That's a giant source of edge for your trading. When you have a breakout setup that all of a sudden turns into a failed breakout, that is a giant source of edge. So that it's two sources of edge that we look for. Confirmation that our setup is correct, and then those setups to switch. Those are the two times that I think in general we have just everything lines up for us as traders. I'm excited to go through this week, or this 2-week period, I guess, with everybody. Wanted to lay these out. We will begin to variabilize them over the course of 2 weeks. There will not be homework this week. There will be homework next week. But you will start to see how these setups, combined with the market context that we talked about, which is really, I believe, information confirming these setups or suggesting that these setups are going to be a little bit different. So I think the market context is really, really helpful in us understanding what variables to look at within each of these setups. I voted for these setups first, but I let everybody pick, and market context was outvoted the setups. So I'm super excited about setups time right now, because I do think the setups, if you understand the setups well, you will understand what trades to make, because you will understand what information to look for. Okay? The homework will come out at the end of this week, but let's get through this week together. Let's have a lot of fun together this week. Thank you, everybody.
God, my stops are just like not going. Jesus Christ.
Are you there? RP. Let's see how this play. Are you there, man? I was taking some longs.
you.